its ascent. But most directly via the Numen group, which outwardly says she is from Numen stock. The Numen are a fascinating race, and according to their appearance preset on the character creation, they are supposed descendants of denizens of another world, long-lived but seldom born. So once again, I turn to my friend Last Protagonist for a translation to help us better understand the nature of this race that Marika hails from. They provided a translation for the Black Knife Assassin armour, and noted that in the original Japanese, the word Numen is not used. Instead, these people are referred to as Maribito. According to the ever-reliable Wikipedia, Maribito are as follows: an ancient Japanese word referring to a supernatural being who comes from afar, bringing gifts of wisdom, spiritual knowledge, and happiness. The term refers to any one of a number of divine beings who were believed to visit villages in Japan, either from beyond the horizon or from beyond distant mountain ranges, bringing gifts. So this additional context from Last Protagonist reinforces the idea that the Numen are not normal beings from this world that we inhabit now. They live supernaturally long and are overall alien to this world that we live in now. And indeed, this alien nature can be reinforced by a further translation provided by Last Protagonist of the Night Maiden and Swordstress puppets, which reads, in his words, "They are a cold-blooded alien race." Now, I talk about the relationship between the Numen and the Nox in a lot more detail in my Eternal Cities lore video, but in short, I posit the Nox are the Numen, but now their identity is defined by their allegiance to the Age of Stars, hence the Nox, Latin for night. Rogier refers to the Black Knife Assassins as scions of the Eternal City, while the Black Knife armour refers to them as Numen. That really is the briefest of summations, and if you want the full deep dive into it, I again refer you to my Eternal Cities lore video. Regardless, this is already making Marika a really interesting character. She comes from an otherworldly race who clearly have a different biology, given they are otherworldly, long-lived, and cold-blooded. Especially of interest is the long-lasting life, given we have two Numen connections that now use the term Eternal. The Eternal Cities and Queen Marika, the Eternal. In my Eternal Cities video, I had suggested that the term Eternal was something different, possibly linked to their curse or the fact they are supposed to live eternally under a false sky as punishment, but as often happens with Elden Ring lore, I have since shifted my position and cannot deny the fact that the term Eternal is used in two instances of long-lived beings. Now, we don't know why Marika was chosen to be Empyrean from among her people. Perhaps she is called Queen Marika because she was already queen of these Numens, or maybe she was a powerful leader or warrior. But I do tend to lean towards the fact that she was already Queen Marika of these people. But regardless, we know the Numen are a remarkable otherworldly race, and therefore one among their number would make a very powerful god. Being raised to godhood is far more than just a title. When Marika became god, she became the vessel for the Elden Ring itself.
Queen Marika is the vessel of the Elden Ring, carrier of its vision. A god in truth.
Queen Marika does literally carry the Elden Ring within her, as we see by it appearing in Radigan Marika's shared body at the end of the game. It clearly became part of her, as when she shatters the Elden Ring in the announcement trailer, we can see that she shatters herself at the same time.
Wait, Julian,
the Greater Well will have needed Marika to operate as its proxy in the lands between. For the
Oh, that's why my mic gain was all the way at the bottom.
And it required a god
I'm sure you can hear me now.
Unshakable power to cement its dominion over the world. And so Marika would brandish the power of the Elden Ring, and to assist in this endeavour, she would take her consort to be Horalu, henceforth known as Godfrey, the first Elden Lord. This is evidently a calculated move, and a necessary one, given the times that Marika lived in. She was aware that to cement her godhood and the age of the Erdtree, she would need martial might, and who better to help her secure this than the mighty Horalu, Lord of the Battlefield. As we discussed in detail in prior chapters, the arrival of the Erdtree will not have been viewed positively from many people. It was a threat to people's ways of life, and many will not have taken kindly to the implication of the Erdtree's arrival. As such, Godfrey was an excellent choice for Lord, and I believe both Elden Lords Radagon and Godfrey are a sign of the times. Godfrey is the world's mightiest warrior at a time of great conflict, and Radagon is a man strong of belief in a time of waning faith. Of course, we will discuss Radagon shortly. Joining Godfrey would be the Crucible Knights, and we learn of these warriors from the Crucible Axe Helm, which reads, Helm of the Crucible Knights, who served Godfrey, the first Elden Lord. Holds the power of the Crucible of Life, the primordial form of the Erd Tree. As we have already discussed, the age of the Crucible will have overlapped with the age of the Erd Tree, and at this stage, the power of the Crucible will still have been seen as divinity, and as such, the Crucible Knights will have been the foremost warriors for the Erd Tree in this early era. So with such might at her command, Marika would look to secure her new holdings as a god, and brandish the very power of the Elden Ring against the most dangerous threat that existed, the Fire Giants. So again, this is a subject that I have covered in detail in my Legacy of Fire lore video, and I don't want to make this long video longer than it needs to be, so I won't go into detail about the actual battles and details of the war against the Giants, but it is important to analyse from Marika's perspective what happened in this war, because a lot of what would happen would shape the culture of the Erd Tree and Marika's rule itself. We know that the decision to make war upon the Fire Giants was a logical one. Not only were they a powerful race that worshipped a god that fell outside the purview of the Greater Will, but they actually posed a danger to the emergent Erd Tree. We learn this via the Surge o' Flame incantation, which tells us that the Flame of Ruin was capable of burning the Erd Tree, therefore making it one of the few direct physical threats to the Erd Tree. We know that people of Erd Tree faith, prophets, would have visions of the Flame of Ruin burning down the Erd Tree throughout history. For example, we hear of this dire prophecy via the Catch Flame incantation, which reads, Incantation originating from a sinister prophecy. The Flame of Ruin is anathema to the Erd Tree, but prophets sometimes glimpse it within the faith all the same. Sadly, when this occurs, their sole reward is banishment. So this of course is the background story to the Prophet starting class, one of the many bits of lore that I discuss in my starting class lore video, which I will link below. What is interesting is that the incantation describes the Flame of Ruin as anathema, which as a term, when used in a religious or organisational context, means something denounced or deemed an abhorrence to said faith. Its very existence, therefore, was in opposition to the Erd Tree just by its existence, and its allegiance to another god, the Fell God, meant it was something that could never be incorporated by the Rising Order. And indeed the Roar Medallion talisman describes the Giants as mortal enemies of the Erd Tree, and so it seems they were always destined to do battle for supremacy of the lands between. It is unclear whether prophets existed at this time, and it was visions like this that informed the decision of Queen Marika to wage war, or whether it was just a logical conclusion based on what she already knew of their people. At this stage, the conviction of Marika is pretty clear, that she fully believed in the mission of the Erd Tree, and was strong in her faith, and utterly without mercy for her enemies. And we can gather this from the speech that Melania recreates for us at the first Church of Marika on the mountaintops of the Giants.
In Marika's own words, hark, brave warriors. Hark, my lord Godfrey. We commend your deeds. Guidance hath delivered ye through each ordeal to the place ye stand. Put the giants to the sword and confine the flame atop the mount. Let a new epoch begin, an epoch glistening with life. Brandish the Elden Ring for the age of the Erd Tree.
One thing of particular interest in this speech to me is the use of the term brandish that Marika uses in regards to the Elden Ring. The word brandish is usually used in reference to a weapon being wielded, therefore suggesting that the Elden Ring, its power, was actually wielded as a weapon in this battle. And given the way that Radagon uses the power of the Elden Ring in the final battle, we can only imagine Marika at the height of her power. And I do think this is one of the most incredible and interesting things about Marika, is we hear so much about her, but we never see her at the height of her domain or the height of her powers, and we can only imagine what a terrible force she would have been to meet on the battlefield while brandishing the power of the Elden Ring. Combining this immense power with Godfrey, the Crucible Knights, the betrayal of the Trolls, and the Zaymore, Marika had tipped the scales so far in the Erd Tree's favour that the Giants really had no chance. The way in which she deals with the last surviving member of the Fire Giant race once again tells us a great deal about Marika's ruthlessness when it came to her enemies at this early stage. I of course refer to the information found within the Fire Giant's remembrance, which reads as follows. The Fire Giant is a survivor of the war against the Giants. Upon realising the flames of their forge would never die, Queen Marika marked him with a curse. O trifling giant, mayst thou tend thy flame for eternity. Now, before anyone says, I'm not judging Marika for being ruthless. War is war at the end of the day, and generals need to make a lot of difficult decisions. I'm only making this disclaimer because in my Golden Order and Gold Mask video, I had a couple of comments where people believed I was passing judgment when I described how Gold Mask perceived the fickleness of the gods. I admire Marika greatly and have a great deal of empathy for the position she is in as the god of a difficult era. Regardless, objectively, her treatment of the last giant is a calculated one. Realising there was no way to smother the Flame of Ruin completely, there was no benefit in killing the last giant. In fact, as we learned from Burn O Flame, killing him would have actually been a mercy, as death is the only way to break the curse of being destined to tend the flame forever. Instead, Marika uses this curse to her benefit, condemning him to a life of solitary duty. He is the last of his kind, and he has to endure this period by himself, knowing that the rest of his race has been extinguished. His duty, his curse, is tending to the flame, and him being there having to tend this flame, in a practical sense serves as a last obstacle for anyone who wants to access the Flame of Ruin, and in that way Marika is very smart in keeping him alive, just in case someone tries to access the Flame of Ruin. The War of the Giants would have an everlasting and indelible effect on Erdtree culture, especially as it pertains to their perception of fire. Fire would remain reviled and feared, something we learn about via the Spark Aromatic, which reads, Art of the perfumers who fought in the shattering. Though fire was prohibited to those who served the Erdtree, this rule was forgotten as the war drew ever on. The fear of the flame, conjured by the conflict with the giants, and the fear of their Flame of Ruin, would integrate itself into Erdtree culture, being a forbidden tool, and the burning of the Erdtree would of course become the first cardinal sin of the Erdtree faith, and those that had the prophecies of the burning of the Erdtree and would begin to brandish fire incantations were of course banished from its society. Regardless, the charismatic and powerful Queen Marika had defeated the giants, and is told by the sword memorial found on the mountaintops, this is what marked the beginning of the age of the Erdtree proper. The age of the Crucible was over. Through Marika, the Greater Will had established a powerful foothold on the mortal plane, anchored by the power of the Erdtree. The first church of Marika would be established at the site of the Erdtree's greatest victory, on the mountaintops of the giants, and in time many churches to the new god would be erected, and in general the faith would spread beyond the lands between. As a god with a human lord as her husband, Marika would have the first of her children, and these would be the children born of Godfrey, known as the Golden Lineage, to which we can tie Godwyn the Golden, Moog, Morgott, and eventually Godric, though the latter is several generations separated from the rest. And Marika and her golden lineage would become emblematic of these heady days of the Erdtree and central to the pantheon of the Erdtree royal family. What would follow would be the golden age of abundance, which must have been an incredible period to witness, and an age that reinforced Marika's own belief in the Erdtree's grace. And so with that said, let us examine these good old days, the Age of Plenty. The greatest lore item in the game, the Albinauric Bloodclot, says the following. Albinaurics are life forms made by human hands, thus many believe them to live impure lives, untouched by the Erdtree's grace. Now the implication of this is that the Erdtree would become the centre, the focal point, for all natural life. And in no time was this better illustrated than the so-called Age of Abundance. We can learn of this interesting period of Erdtree history from the incantation Erdtree Heal, which reads as follows. The Erdtree once flourished with abundance, yet it was only for a fleeting moment. Such is the course of all life. This period of abundance seems to be the heady early days of the age of the Erdtree, when the bounty of the Erdtree spilled from it like apples from a fruit tree. As keenly observed by my fellow tarnished Elden, speculatively, we can see engravings commemorating this period of plenty at the Chapel of Anticipation and above the door of the real Round Table Hold. The reliefs identified by Elden show people carrying vessels that are similar in appearance to ancient Greek amphorae, and these were traditionally used to store wine, oil, milk, or grain, and it was symbolic of plenty or abundance. To me, this lines up with the symbolism shown on the icon shield and the Blessed Dew talisman. Both the item descriptions of these items describe this age of plenty. For example, the Blessed Dew talisman reads as follows. Talisman depicting a drop of the Erdtree's sap, a blessed boon. It was once thought that the blessed sap of the Erdtree would drip from its boughs forever, but that age of plenty swiftly came to a close, and with time, the Erdtree became more an object of faith. Again, we are getting direct reference to this age of plenty, but that it only lasted a brief time, clearly in the opening years of the Erdtree's emergence from the Crucible. To me, this early period of abundance makes sense logically, as the Erdtree emerged from the Crucible of all life, a focus of chaotic life energy, and this blessed dew is almost a remnant of the life from which the Erdtree has emerged. However, this was clearly finite, which makes sense as the Erdtree is more representative and symbolic of a period of regression, an age where the chaotic, uncontrollable life found within the Crucible made way for an age where life is to settle and pull towards the mean. We get further evidence of the bounty or dew being tied to the residual energies of the Crucible from the amber medallions. They all read the following. The Erdtree's old sap becomes amber, treasured as the most precious jewels in the age of Godfrey, the first Elden Lord. A primordial life energy resides inside. And indeed, these were not just aesthetically pleasing relics. The dew or amber has some real power, as we can see by the fact these talismans actually boost our very life force in varying ways, imbuing us with the power of life contained within, the primordial life force once found within the Crucible. The word choice of primordial is clearly linking this to the Crucible, the primordial source of life, and thus I think this period, this age of abundance or age of plenty, is an overlap period between the age of the Crucible and the age of the Erdtree, where the energies of the Crucible are still flowing, bursting forth from the Erdtree before it settles into the age of the Erdtree proper. The power and strength of the vitality that bled from the Erdtree in this early era of its emergence not only took the form of the dew, but seemingly the tree itself exuded an aura, as we learn from the Warming Stone item, which reads as follows. It's said that the Erdtree was once as warm as the gentle sun, and would gradually heal all who bathed in its rays. In paintings of the Erdtree, from what we presume to be the early days, we see it bursting with rays of light, and the use of the word sun is also interesting because there's evidence to suggest that the rays of the Erdtree were so potent that Leyndell was referred to as the seat of the sun, something we glean from the Sun Realm shield, and we can find these shields on the undead found outside Leyndell itself. And I think what cements that it is talking about Leyndell in this Sun Realm shield is the fact that it's in line with all descriptions of the Age of Plenty, i.e. it didn't last long, and this age of sunlight is long since past. And while the Erdtree does still give off a massive ray of light, it is nothing compared to the luster that we see in some of these paintings of the Erdtree of old. In general, and in totality, the vision we have of this Age of Plenty is one of positivity, vitality, and bounty. Clearly, faith wasn't much of a challenge at this point because the rewards and benefits were so plentiful and obvious to see. And indeed, in early Erdtree society, it appears that Queen Marika herself would come down and present blessings to her people in person, something we learn of from the Erdtree's favourite talisman, which reads, "It is said that when the age of the Erdtree began, such blessings were personally bestowed upon their recipients by Queen Marika herself." I just find this to be another positive scene that depicts the heady days of the early Erdtree rule, where Marika herself interacted with her people and blessed them. And as said, I think that the reason this period is so fleeting is because it is a transitional period between the Crucible and Erdtree, and you could either see it as the late era of the Crucible or the early era of the Erdtree, and I see it as a combination of both. And once the residual energy of the faded Crucible had gone, that is when the blessings stop. Much like with Anor Londo in Dark Souls, it is nice to think of Leyndell and the Erdtree as the shattered remains of something truly beautiful. In both cases, we are blown away by the beauty of these fallen civilizations, even at their lowest points, and it is almost beyond our comprehension, the splendour of Leyndell and the Erdtree in these days of pure bliss and wonder, and we can only look at the paintings, faded paintings, and wonder what could have been. But with those heady days behind us, we need to now get to the core of who Marika is, and of course we cannot do this at the big twist of Elden Ring, that Marika is equal to Radagon. And so now let us examine the immortal Rebus.
The Rebus! The Golden Order is founded on the principle that Marika is the one true god. However, the name of Marika's second husband, King Consort Radagon, also appeared. Who exactly was Radagon?
So let's just get to it, the big revelation for us all on our first playthrough. Marika is equal to Radagon. They are two individual beings in one body, yet of course they are two distinctly different personalities, both with their own ideals and their own actions. I think a lot of people struggle with this concept and what the point of it is, because it is fairly unceremoniously dumped on you without really explaining the how or the why. While a lot of questions will continue to be unanswered, then you fight Elden Beast and the game's over. So I'll do my best to share my understanding of it, and what I perceive to be the truth of the Marika Radagon question. To understand it truly is to understand both the laws of regression revered by the Golden Order, and to understand the ideal of the Rebus, the ultimate end goal of alchemy. I talk in this my Golden Order video, but one of the tenets of the Golden Order fundamentalism is the idea of regression, a type of convergence. We have already discussed how the principles of regression illustrate how the fundamentalists envision a more refined, tighter concept of life, where the outliers are pulled closer towards the norm. However, the law of regression actually goes further than this, as it says, regression is the pool of meaning, that all things yearn eternally to converge. This idea of convergent is actually one really well explored by the Dead Space trilogy, and if for some bizarre reason you haven't played those games, please drop everything right now and go and play them. But in essence, it seems as though the underlying concepts of the Golden Order is that life should be getting closer to convergence, that they should be pulling together and there should be less disparity in all forms of life. And this is why the idea of an Erdtree burial, of life being absorbed and returned to the Erdtree, is very critical to the law of regression, as it is life returning to the Erdtree, becoming one with the Erdtree, and removing that disparity. And once we comprehend this idea, we start to see the pool of things in many things related to the Erdtree and the Golden Order. Intelligence and faith pulling together to create the Golden Order incantations. Radagon studying faith and incantations to become complete. Twins, Dee and his brother, who have converged to share one soul. And of course, the two beings who share one body, the ultimate representation of convergence, the god of the Golden Order. This idea of two beings sharing one body, one male and one female, is an alchemical theory said to be the great work of the field, the rebus, the magnum opus of any alchemist. It is a metaphor for the alchemical process as a whole, the bringing together and purification of two things to create something better. I believe the Golden Order is alchemical in its ideals, the blending of things together to make something better, and thus this immortal rebus of Marika and Radagon is the very pinnacle of life as described by the laws of regression and causality, represented by the soul Erdtree itself, and the convergence of all life to the Erdtree through Erdtree burial. As a result, Marika and Radagon's merge is obviously fitting as they represent the pinnacle of the laws espoused by those who study the Erdtree and the Golden Order, meaning it must be linked somehow to the underlying mathematics and form of the Elden Ring. It also makes sense that Radagon would be pushing the ideals of fundamentalism, given he knows the true end result of the law of regression. So I now need to speak on what I believe to be the truth behind their origins as a rebus and when it happened. As there are a lot of ideas as to when it happened, I used to think it happened when they were married, and some people believe that it happened when the shattering actually occurred. But I'm going to give my view on what I believe happened. These are all valid ideas, as it all is just speculation, but I'm going to give what I think makes the most sense to the surrounding lore. Upon studying this subject and looking at all the surrounding lore, I believe that Marika became a rebus upon the moment of her ascension to godhood, that Radagon has always been part of her history as a god.
Scared me.
I don't believe
Every
that they
time I
were two
drop
individuals
these,
that
even the
later
tiniest
merged at
bit,
some
I
point,
always
and I
get
believe that Radagon
a
has
mini
always
heart attack.
existed as a part of Marika,
I don't want to
but
print
not
these
vice
again.
versa, as Marika, in my opinion, was not born a rebus. We know that she wasn't always a god, that she was once a Numen, and I believe aside from the unusual nature of Numen, she was just a Numen woman, or queen, called Marika. She was then selected to become an Empyrean, and then became a god of a new era upon defeating the giants. I've always pondered on the relevance of Radagon's hair. As we learn from the giant's red braid, Radagon associated his hair with the red hair of the giants, and I've always found this item description curious, because it implies he is somehow linked to the fire giants. And now I ponder, could it be that this is an imprint of this conflict between Marika and the fire giants, that upon her ascension to godhood and the creation of her other half, Radagon, did they somehow leave an imprint on Radagon, or should I say her Radagon half? That is of course just colourful speculation, so let's get into the real reasons why I believe that Radagon and Marika were always a rebus from the moment she became a god. Firstly, there are the ideals of regression and convergence that we've already discussed. When we talked about the Erdtree, we talked about how it's intrinsically linked to the Elden Ring, and how its changes to the Elden Ring affected the Erdtree. So when Marika became the vessel for the Elden Ring, and became intrinsically linked to the Elden Ring, does it not make sense that the Elden Ring could affect who Marika was down to her DNA? We know the ideals of law of regression and law of causality are underpinned by the Golden Order's interpretation of the Elden Ring. If the Elden Ring's form is a metaphysical representation of regression and convergence, does this mean it could have transformed Marika to also represent the ideal, given they are now linked? I certainly think so. Secondly, in history, Radagon just seems to appear at the time of the Liurnian Wars, and made massive decisions, such as making peace with the Carians through marriage, decisions really only Marika should be making, given she's the leader of the Erdtree forces. How was he able to make these massive decisions? Returning to the Carian betrothal, I think this is also a stage that gives us a lot of evidence that Radagon was already Marika at this stage, and it wasn't something that happened later, either at the time of Marika-Radagon's marriage, or at the time of the shattering. Because first of all we have the Mask of Confidence, the Mask of the Preceptors who served Rennala. The mask reads as follows. When Radagon married Rennala, he ordered the Carian magic preceptors to don these masks, to make it clear that all of their matters were to be kept strictly private. This seems to give off the vibe that Radigan had something massive to hide, a big, deep secret. And what else could it really be when we're talking about Radigan? Meaning that he was already Marika at this time, and the Preceptors were to keep that fact hidden. This also seems to be the same secret that Muriel describes him hiding when talking about the statue that was created by a sculptor in Lane Dale.
You know, it's said that Lord Radigan harboured a secret. A famed sculptor of the Erdtree capital was once summoned to render Lord Radigan's likeness in giant stature, when he glimpsed the skeleton in Radigan's closet. And as such, it's said the great statue harbours his secret too.
And to cement that Radigan was always Marika, even at the stage of his marriage to Renala, there's the fact he leaves Renala a fragment of the Elden Ring. The Amber Egg, that is what the Amber Egg is. Again, how would Radigan, a mere champion, have access to such a powerful artifact? In addition, Muriel makes some interesting and pointed claims about the bizarre nature of Radigan's ascension, his abandonment of Renala, and his marriage to Marika.
However, when Godfrey, first Elden Lord, was hounded from the lands between, Radigan left Renala to return to the Erdtree capital, becoming Queen Marika's second husband and king consort, taking the title of Second Elden Lord. The mystery endures to this day as to why Lord Radigan would cast Lady Renala aside, and moreover, why a mere champion would be chosen for the seat of Elden Lord.
And if you think about it, he is right. It is totally bizarre that Radigan basically upsticks, abandons his family, seemingly on a whim. It is also strange that it would be a mere champion, for that is what Radigan is, chosen out of nowhere to be elevated to Elden Lord after Godfrey left the lands between. Yet all of this would then make sense if Radigan and Marika were always one, and Radigan's ascension is him essentially supporting his other half when a new Elden Lord was needed. Of course, one of the other aspects of the Rebus is that it is two different elements coming together, and so just because Marika and Radigan share one body, and Radigan's actions can be explained by him also being part of Marika, doesn't mean they aren't also individual. So I think when people have a problem comprehending that they were always a Rebus, is due to the fact that we have actions attributed to Radigan and to Marika. So to make it clear, they aren't the same person. They are two different personalities inhabiting one body. And as we can see from the final fight, they could clearly switch between different personalities, meaning that Radigan would go and do things that would be attributed to him, and Marika would go and do things that were attributed to her. And if no one saw the transformation, no one would know they were the same person. I think what also causes some confusion is Marika's line in the Queen's bedchamber that Melina can recreate for us. So let's listen to that now and we'll break it down.
In Marika's own words, O Radigan, leal hound of the Golden Order, thou art yet to become
I'm genuinely having trouble
thou
keeping my
art
eyes
yet
open. I'm
to become a god.
After this one, I
Let
am
us be
probably going
shattered,
to end the
both
stream.
Mine other self.
It's
So
just
in
getting
this
really
dialogue,
tired. I'm sorry, guys.
Marika says, "Thou art not yet me," and people take this to mean that they aren't yet conjoined, when again I think this is a critical
Oh,
misunderstanding of
sweet,
what a Rebus
sweet
is, because they are two wholly individual people. They just share one body. And so when Marika says, "Thou art not yet me," I think she's implying the fact that she is still the true god, not Radigan. Radigan is merely her Elden Lord. And then she goes on to say, "Mine other self," which to me again cements the fact that Radigan is already part of Marika at this stage. And this is why in the introductory cinematic, we see it flashing between Marika and Radigan. It's both halves vying for control of their shared body. And we can learn of this fight from Marika's hammer description, which reads as follows. Stone hammer, made in the lands of the Numen, outside the lands between. The tool with which Queen Marika shattered the Elden Ring, and Radigan attempted to repair it. So they both wrestled for control of their body as Marika tried to shatter the ring and Radigan tried to undo her damage. Yet obviously we know what happens. Marika won out. She shattered the Elden Ring, and then they were both imprisoned by the Elden Beast. But to prevent his Golden Order from being usurped, Radagon would then put these spiny briars and his seal on the entrance to the Erdtree. His loyalty to the Golden Order so blind that he'd rather keep a shattered world than allow someone to repair it. Something not even the Greater Well expects, as they are stunned into silence after we are denied entrance to the Elden Ring. The battle between the two halves of the Rebus is what sets into motion the events of the game. As we see from the introductory cinematic of the game, Queen Marika has not been seen since the shattering of the Elden Ring, and no one in the outside world knows her involvement in breaking the Elden Ring. She has just vanished, and the lands between are plunged into chaos. So I think that's a sufficient explanation of what my understanding of what Marika is and what she did. But why did she do it? To try and understand this, let us move on to the final portion of this video essay, where we actually analyse who Marika was as a human, as a person, and how far her discontent goes. One of the things that I find interesting when we're looking at Marika is the statues we see of her throughout the world, including the one at the first Church of Marika, showing her in a crucified position. This means one of two things, and firstly the most obvious, yet I believe incorrect answer, is that these statues were sculpted after Marika was crucified. However, this doesn't make sense, as how would people know she's crucified, given she has disappeared and no one has seen her?
Now, Queen Marika the Eternal is nowhere to be found.
I would instead like you to consider another idea. These statues are symbolic of her burden as a god. To support this idea, let us look at Marika's source seal, which reads as follows: "Solemn duty weighs upon the one beholden, not unlike a gnawing curse, from which there is no deliverance." It is easy to forget that Marika, while a mighty god in her time, was ultimately once a human, or close enough at least, who inherited an incredible burden as described by this source seal. I think that one of the main underlying factors of Marika's decisions is due to the incredible burden that weighs her down over time, as perfectly represented by her statuary, and at the same time a series of unfortunate events begin to occur that will have broken her down over time. Some accuse Marika of being this
Yeah, I'm
kind
gonna
of
finish this one and head off
Machiavellian
stream.
bad guy who always planned to bring down the Greater Will. But I never really got that impression, and without them really knowing Marika, I'm not sure how they can rush to that conclusion. I think it's a bit of a Machiavellian stereotype, and I always saw Marika as a more human character. I believe her early speeches, where she is clearly supporting the Erdtree and the Greater Will, are very earnest and very impassioned. Instead, I see her as a fairly tragic character, bound by her duty, who experiences tragedy after tragedy, difficulty after difficulty, that eventually would lead her to question her own duty that she is bound to, and being bound to the Erdtree. There was the War of the Dragons, when the ancient dragons themselves attacked Leyndell, headed by the mighty dragon Grandsax. While Leyndell was ultimately successful in repelling this attack, the Bolt of Grandsax describes how the dragons brought great destruction to the capital, and the scars of this conflict still remain. There was also the Godskin apostasy, a subject I have tackled in numerous videos, so again I won't let this video go on longer than need be, but suffice it to say this was a real challenge to her authority, and I truly believe it will have shaken her to the core. Here was a force that intended to kill her and her kin, after no doubt centuries of her being certain in her power and immortality, and the same for her golden lineage and family. To compound her pain, the Gloam-Eyed Queen, the leader of the Apostles, was an Empyrean chosen by the Fingers, as stated by the Black Flame Ritual incantation, which reads as follows: "It is said that she was an Empyrean chosen by the Fingers." This is a confusing bit of lore, and it means that the Gloam-Eyed Queen was set up to be a god to take Marika's place. And we have to ask, was it a Greater Will's Fingers that chose her? While we know that other forces can command fingers, like the 3 fingers of the Frenzied Flame, the most numerous fingers that we know about are the 2 fingers of the Greater Will. Does this mean it was the Greater Will that chose the Glomide Queen to replace Marika? And if so, how would this make Marika feel? That she's disposable? Replaceable? Not only was she meant to be usurped by this Glomide Queen, she was meant to be killed by her. Either way, Marika did come out on top of this engagement by using Malekith to seal away destined death, but one of the major results of it was the isolation of death by Malekith and the creation of the Golden Order, a world without death. This deathless world would set the stage for a massive flaw in the Golden Order, and it would be revealed by the next earth-shaking event in Marika's reign, the Night of the Black Knives. Now, there are plenty of theories on Marika's involvement in this event, and no matter where you fall in the debate, the result is always really the same. It helped further fracture the flawed Golden Order, and it helped push Marika over the edge and shatter the Elden Ring. For those unfamiliar with the debate surrounding the Night of the Black
What just
Knives,
shined in my face?
there is a prevailing theory that Marika had over the edge and shatter the flawed Golden Order, and it helped push Marika over the edge and shatter the Elden Ring. For those unfamiliar with the debate surrounding the Night of the Black Knives, there is a prevailing theory that Marika had a hand in it. And for a more in-depth look at that theory, I'd refer you to my good friend Ashen Hollow's video on that very subject.
I like Ashen.
The item in question that is central to this theory is the Black Knife armour, which reads the following. The assassins that carried out the deeds of the Night of the Black Knives were all women, and rumoured to be Numen who had close ties with Marika herself. So of course, understandably, many people read this as the close ties to Marika, meaning that they are Marika's servants or Marika's people who carried out the assassination of Godwyn at her behest. I've come to the conclusion that the language used here is purposefully ambiguous, and therefore it's unclear what we are meant to definitively know as the truth. To try and better understand the intention behind the item description, I did ask Last Protagonist to translate it, and they provided the following translation. The assassins who perpetrated the night of the conspiracy were all female, and one theory says that they were Numen close to Marika. So I find this version of the translation to be more useful in making it clear that this connection is not clear, that it is rumour, as it uses the term one theory. And then looking at the English translation in tandem with this translation, the English one uses rumoured to be Numen who had close ties with Marika herself. So while it does make it more clear that this is just a rumour and not definitive fact, it also does nothing to disprove the theory that Marika was involved, and I totally accept that I have to take this theory as a serious one, given the language used here. It's also kind of backed up by Marika's perceived attitude towards her demigod children, as there are two bits of dialogue that reveal that Marika really sees her children as tools. One from purportedly Marika herself, recreated by Melina.
In Marika's own words, hear me, demigods. My children, beloved, make of thyselves that which ye desire. Be it a lord, be it a god, but should ye fail to become aught at all, ye will be forsaken, amounting only to sacrifices.
And then we have one given to us by a ghost witness in the Weeping Peninsula. And thus many feel that she wouldn't think twice about sacrificing her own son to strike back against the greater will and expose the flaw of those that live in death. My personal opinion on it is, it doesn't matter, because I think that Marika's real reason for shattering the Elden Ring is because she became aware of the Golden Order's flaw that was revealed by the Night of the Black Knives. Whether she's behind the event or not, I still believe it is the final event that pushes her to shatter the Elden Ring, as it lays bare the flaws at the heart of the Golden Order. There is another dialogue of Marika where she vows to search the depths of the Golden Order, as if to better understand it and allay the doubts and fears that were beginning to plague the lands between.
In Marika's own words, I declare mine intent. to search the depths of the Golden Order through understanding of the proper way. Our faith, our grace is increased. Those blissful early days of blind belief are long past. My comrades, why must ye falter?
It is easy to understand what these doubts may very well be, and as I discussed in my Golden Order video, the biggest mistake Marika makes is having the Rune of Death confined, because at this stage the world became a deathless nightmare. Every human we see in this world is grey, hollow, desiccated, and generally pretty miserable looking. This is the result of no death, and this is something we learn from the Aristocrat set, worn by the zombie-like wandering nobles, and its description reads as follows. Abandoning their birthplace after the shattering, these undead wanderers are the pitiful product of unending life. Given the miserable state of the zombie-like inhabitants of the world, no wonder Marika begins to notice that this isn't right, and intends to search the depths of the Golden Order for an answer, much like Goldmask later would. There's a really great post by Ha that goes into the connections between Norse mythology and Marika, but what's of interest to me is the fact they point out the different tablets in Marika's room, in the Queen's Chamber area, and I have always wondered what these tablets are. Ha links the aforementioned dialogue of Marika to these tablets, saying that this is evidence of her study of the Golden Order, and ultimately she came to a conclusion that she did not like, that pushed her to the end result of shattering the Elden Ring. This is a really thoughtful Reddit post with some good connections to Norse mythology as well that I just didn't cover in this video, so if you'd like a look at that, I will link the entire Reddit post in the description below, so thanks to Ha for that information. So in summary, the Godskin apostasy pushes Marika to confined destined death. The world becomes a miserable, deathless hell. Marika notices the declining faith of her comrades, and she herself has doubts, and so she plumbs the depths of the Golden Order to find an answer, and yet in there she finds no good answer, and she either organises the Night of the Black Knives,
I'm
or she does
genuinely
not.
super
By
tired.
the way, the death of Godwyn and the spread of death throughout the land reveals the critical flaw in the Elden Ring, and thus she shatters it. And this brave decision, even fighting against her leal other half, would cost her dearly. And so it's with a heavy heart I must discuss the final tragic fate of Queen Marika.
I don't know if it was like picking up.
I find Marika's martyring and her treatment by the Greater Will to be one of the more brutal aspects of the game, and the only thing that makes it a little better for me is that she's not completely powerless and seems to still have some skin in the game, so to speak. That said, to complete Marika's story, you do need to consider the brutality of her final fate. When you ask Enea about Marika's treatment, the fingers say the following on Marika.
Marika's trespass demanded a heavy sentence. But even in shackles, she remains a god and the vision's vessel. Confer great runes to become Elden Lord and join Queen Marika as her consort. The fingers have willed it so.
Now consider what the Greater Will is actually saying and asking of us here. Marika, despite being a broken, shattered shell, is still to remain the vessel of the Elden Ring in her corpse-like shattered form. Additionally, we're to marry this form and rule on as a proxy, condemning her to an eternity of being nothing more than a container. What a tortured and bleak existence. This punishment does not fit the crime, and you could think that the Greater Will could find a new vessel, a new god, for their Elden Ring. Yet as mentioned, it does seem as though Marika has taken some steps and isn't completely powerless. It appears Marika placed Hugh in Round Table Hold to kill a god, to kill her, to put her out of her misery, as it seems that Hugh has made some kind of promise.
I was asking if you were able to hear me.
So with that context, let us consider the endings of Elden
Ring.
Can
you hear me well?
Choose. As with this analysis in hand, it does now seem that the 4 Elden Lord endings are really the worst for Marika. I personally like the Dustborn ending the best, but after thinking about it, I can't help but feel great sorrow for Marika's ultimate fate, For even if I'm giving relief to those who live in death by bringing them in to the new order, Marika would be condemned to exist solely as a husk for the Elden Ring, and therefore you can't think but the frenzied flame ending would be better, because at least in that circumstance she would melt away. One final puzzle piece remains in regards to Marika for me, and this is Gideon's purported relationship with Queen Marika. As we learn the following from his armor set: knowledge begins with the recognition of one's ignorance, the realization that the search for knowledge is unending. But when Gideon glimpsed into the will of Queen Marika,
I mean, God.
he shuddered in fear at the end that should not be.
Here, wait. I might be able to
So
turn
we
up.
know that Gideon has much closer contact
Alright,
with
does that
his
sound
two
better?
fingers and greater will, as is told to us by the divine fortification incantation. His armor set appears to imply that he has somehow communed with Marika and her will, as shown by him confronting us near the end of the game, despite him claiming throughout the game that he also wishes to ascend to the Elden Throne. He bars your way at the end because he believes Marika does not want this, that she in fact wants us to struggle for
I'm almost done with the space boat. Hi, King.
I knew you'd come.
I am
To
going
stand
to
before
go
the
take a
Elden
nap
Ring,
after
to
this.
become Elden Lord.
I didn't realize how tired I was
As it
before I
stands in affairs,
started
I
streaming.
commend your spirit, but alas, none shall take the throne. Queen Marika has high hopes for us, that we continue to struggle. Unto eternity.
While this may be confusing, I see this as Gideon being part right in Marika's objectives, but ultimately he has peered into something he doesn't truly understand. Knowledge begins with the recognition of one's ignorance. Marika is a god, and a god who's essentially imprisoned and basically, for all intents and purposes, dead. I believe by touching her will, he is interpreting something so eldritch and cosmic that he's only pulled certain emotions from it. I think he is part right in that he has interpreted that Marika doesn't want anyone to become the new Elden Lord. As we've just discussed, this is a pretty horrible fate for Marika, so why on earth would she want that? But other actions of hers do seem to belay the fact that she does want us to reach her in the Erd Tree and bring an end to her suffering. She places Hugh in Round Table Hold so that we may slay a god. She also seems to have repurposed Melina, her possible daughter, to assist the Tarnished in making it to the Erd Tree. Bear in mind that Gideon has reached into a being that is actually comprised of two individual halves. Perhaps it is actually Radagon's will that he has interpreted incorrectly. Radagon doesn't want anyone to ascend to the Elden Throne, and in fact wants nothing to change. He does want us to struggle for eternity and to have everyone barred from entering the centre of the Erd Tree. I think that Gideon has peered into the will of churning emotions of a conflicted god of two halves.
Are you working on the same
and
thing?
misinterpreted the true message.
Wait, am I working on the
Yes,
same
Marika
thing
doesn't
right
want
now
anyone to
as I
become
did
Elden
last time I
Lord,
started painting?
but she does want us
Or
to
will
come
I
and
be
put an
working on the
end
same
to
thing
her
next
suffering.
stream?
And so I plead with you, Tarnished, for the love of all that is good, take a sword from Hugh and put an end to Queen Marika's eternal suffering. Most of the greatest fantasy universes have a creation myth, a grand tale of cosmic beings weaving the fabric of the world into existence, such as Eru Iluvatar of the Lord of the Rings mythos, who brings Arda into existence through his great song. Elden Ring is no different. We learn via Hyeta that it is the greater will who is responsible for the diverse life that we witness on this mortal plane by fracturing something known as the One Great. While this may seem like a brief segment of the lore, it spawns multiple questions about the formation of life as we know it, as well as a bigger question. What actually is
First one that I
the
get
greater will?
both.
Many in the community, including myself, have been hasty in
God damn, I
categorizing
don't
the
even
greater
remember
will
what it
as
adds.
one of the outer gods.
Okay.
And of course there is logic to this. given
Yes,
they
this
share
is the same
a
thing I
certain
worked on
nebulous
last stream.
characterization.
I have two
However,
more
is
after
this
this, then
actually
all the
true?
pawns will be finished.
Or is the greater will something more? The greater will is the dominant force in
And
the setting, controlling life, creating it, and imposing its order upon it. So we have to ask ourselves, does this fit the template of an outer god? Or does the greater will more closely match the template of an Abrahamic creator god?
Yes, I am
These
working
are
on
the
the same
grand
thing.
questions that this
that
video
I did
hopes
last
to
minute in
address.
paying stream.
For pondering these foundational
But
ideas has added
I'm
even
also
more
working on the
depth
same
to
thing
this
next
incredible
stream.
world of Elden Ring for me. And I
Tomorrow.
hope by the end of this video you feel the same, even if you do not agree with all the points I make. So join me this week as we assess the nature of the greater will and the outer gods. But he desired rather to subdue to his will both elves and men, envying the gifts with which Iluvatar promised to endow them, and he wished himself to have subjects and servants, and to be called Lord, and to be master over other wills. Such were the desires of Melkor, the first Dark Lord of the Lord of the Rings saga, a cosmic being who envied the ability of his progenitor, Iluvatar, to create life. For Melkor wished to create for himself, rather than being a mere instrument of something greater than he. And if he could not create, he would dominate, warp, and control Arda, and those who inhabited it. Melkor and Iluvatar both are unfathomable cosmic beings beyond human ken, but only one of them had the ability to create. Only one of them was the supreme deity, a being based on Tolkien's own Catholic beliefs in a supreme soul deity. That idea and difference is the core of this video. The differences between a being who can create and one who can merely act upon the world which has already been created. It is my aim to do a comprehensive analysis of both the greater will and the outer gods, their abilities, their aims, and their nature, ultimately to highlight their differences.
So see all of these together.
I myself have been quick to name the greater will an outer god, such as in my Mikla lore video. But the more I've studied the lore and attempted to understand the nature of Elden Ring's world and its history, the more I have come to disagree with this idea. I think that the greater will is something more than an outer god, and that it takes the position of the supreme deity of this world. My main reasons for doing so, and therefore the outline of my thesis, are: number 1, in-game references to outer gods and the greater will not crossing paths. 2, the language used for both of these different gods.
I'm gonna
3,
close this before I
what
type it.
outer gods actually
probably
are and what they can do.
Pain away.
And 4, the greater will as a supreme creator deity that doesn't fit the mold of an outer god.
Alright,
So with this thesis laid out, let us tackle the first of these, and that is the mentions of outer gods and the greater will in-game, and their lack of interaction. There are 8 direct mentions to outer gods in the game, with 4 of these being semi-repetitive, as they are tied to Mikla's needle. But in totality, these 8 references reference the Scarlet Rot God via the Scorpion Stinger, and via the Lake of Rot map. Then there is the Formless Mother,
to put
or
a clear
Mother of
coat
Blood,
on.
which is mentioned by Mogwin's Sacred Spear.
And
Then there's the outer god of the Deathrite birds and the Twin Bird, which is mentioned on the Twin Bird Kite Shield. And then finally there is the outer god of the Friends of
as
Flame,
similar
which
as
is
I can
implied
make
to be one via the Mikla's needle and the other versions of this needle,
Alright.
because it is used to ward away the
I
influence
did
of the
try.
outer gods, and this item's only use is to ward away the influence of the Friends of Flame.
Alright, I did try.
There's also another mention of the ancient god of Rot in the
Alright,
Blue
let me
Dancer
see if I
Talisman, so
can-
let's be generous and bring that up to 9 direct mentions to the outer gods in-game.
If you're
There are
able to see
15
this,
unique
I can't.
references to the greater
Oh wait,
will
here
in
it.
game, including item
Yes,
descriptions,
I can see that.
dialogue, and I say unique because there are repeat references in all of the
can pull it
Nox
back
armor
up.
and the 2 mirror helms. None of the mentions of the
focused for
outer
a
gods name the greater will as one of their number, nor do any of the mentions of the greater will label it as an outer god, and this should really be our first clue that the greater will stands apart from these nebulous deities, or at least make it clear that it is not a certainty that it is an outer god. And thankfully for my theory, this is also backed up by the original Japanese
I'm
view.
so proud of
The
how I did
nuance that
this.
was brought to my attention by the viewer, the Great Cosmic Axiotl, who commented on one of my community posts. The Great Cosmic Axiotl claims
Actually, I got the 3D models for
comes
the
via the famous
black
Italian
side of the
YouTuber Sabaku
prints.
no Meiko in episode 38
So now I
of
just
his
have.
Elden Ring series, which I will link below.
Actually, I'm going to
Axiotl
Franklin
noted
with
that the
Michigan
term,
to get the
Japanese for outer god,
special paints
Sotonari,
for
is fitting because
these
it is
ones
used to define
tomorrow.
beings that fall outside a group or a system
And I'm
outside
going to
God.
stream after that.
Oxyatl then notes that the Greater Well is never
And then I just
referred
have to paint
in
another
the same way. And in
night.
fact, the term in Japanese for Greater Well is a word that is closely
Two
related to
more
the
of
biblical
these.
god in the
Alright, I've got
Japanese
5, and then I
translation.
can start
This
to
idea
work
of the
on
Greater
the
Well being linguistically tied
shadow side.
to the biblical god is backed up by YouTuber Doug Manguy, a
Oh my
horrendously
god.
underrated
How many
channel
hours?
that provides
Okay,
some of the most
wait.
in-depth breakdowns of the Japanese that
2
I've ever
hours
seen.
per
And I highly
one.
recommend you take a look
Alright,
at their
2,
channel.
4,
In
6,
a video
8,
on hiatus dialogue regarding the Greater Well, Doug Manguy backs up the
16.
idea
Alright,
that the
16
Greater Well
hours for
is
all the
linguistically
puns.
tied to the Abrahamic or biblical god by noting that the Japanese for Greater Well in the game
I think it
borrows
was
from the Japanese translation of the Old Testament.
4.5 to 5 hours
they
for one
believe
night,
that by
so
using the same language, the writers of Elden
So
Ring
26
are very much trying to
hours.
evoke the idea that the Greater Well
I'll say
is the
25
god
hours.
of the lands between.
2.5
again, a massive
hours
shout out
for
to
each
Doug Manguy
rook.
for this
That makes
awesome work.
30.
But to make sure I covered all my bases, I turned to someone I often do for Japanese translation,
And then
Last Protagonist.
1.5
He was able to provide the following information
each
when I asked
bishop.
him to verify these translations. And Last Protagonist did indeed confirm that the Greater Well is not
33
referred to in the
hours,
same manner as the
not
Outer
counting the
Gods
king and
linguistically.
queen.
So thanks again to Last
The king and
Protagonist for
queen
this
will take
verification, to the great cosmic Axiotl for bringing this to my attention, and finally to Doug Manguy for
I
his
think
excellent work. This
7
linguistic proof
hours
should be evidence enough
for
that the
this
Greater Well is meant to be
I
standing
think maybe
apart from
6,
what we know as the Outer Gods.
6,
The
7,
authors
6
want
to
us
7
believe
hours for
it
this
is
one.
something different. However, this was apparent to me even
So-
before I realized there was differences in the Japanese, mainly because of the
So that's
differences in
40
the
hours now, and
presentation
then
and in the lore.
This one
And the Outer
maybe
gods behave
maybe
and operate in a different
4,
manner
no,
to the
5
Greater
hours.
Well. So next, I think it would be
5
prudent
hours
for
for
us
this
to
one.
discuss the Outer Gods, so that we can
45
properly
hours for
comprehend
one
their
side.
nature and see how it differs from the Greater Well. The
Oh
Outer
my
Gods,
God,
in
that's-
essence, are great
oh,
cosmic beings
I gotta
that
sell this
operate
for a
in
lot.
different plane of thought
This
and
can-
existence to us.
I hope it'll
Those who
sell
have
for a
played
lot. It's
Bloodborne
gonna
and are
look
familiar with
really...
the Great Ones will automatically realize that the authors are meaning
Here,
to
if you don't like
evoke
7,
the
I
same
like
kind
6
of idea
more.
of cosmic being. In the linguistic evidence shown by the great
Okay.
cosmic Axiotl
Okay.
and by Last Protagonist that we looked
Oh.
over in the previous chapter,
I'm gonna go
no
grab...
outer gods are
It's
outer
right
gods
here.
because they
Here,
exist
I'm gonna show you
out
this real
with
quick.
this plane of existence. They are outside the order established on the mortal plane of Elden Ring. The cosmic and the divine have often intersected in fantasy before, and so this shouldn't be a massive concept for us to understand. In this world there are grounded gods, elected by these higher beings to rule on their behalf.
These ones were
Cosmic
badly
America.
printed because I printed them with an
Then there are the
FDM printer
cosmic
and not a
gods that
resin
exist
one.
outside our
So
human
they're not as
understanding of life
high
and
quality
outside
or
the
like
normal
or as
parameters
detailed
of this world.
as
you
the
have
other
no doubt
ones,
sensed by the amount of
and
quotes
they're
I've
a
used, my
larger
main
scale.
allegory for this entire video
These are maybe like
is the Silmarillion and the Lord of the
1.5
Rings
times
mythos.
larger.
The gods of that universe, Iluvatar and the Valar, are also cosmic
Okay,
in
so
nature, as
for
events
the
of creation,
black
as
side,
detailed in the
it's all
Silmarillion,
completely different
take place
pieces,
within
by the way.
void of space. But beyond their
They
cosmic
sadly
and
snapped. I
inhuman
printed these a
nature,
long
many
time
questions
ago.
still remain.
But
Where
this
did they
one
come from?
used to have 2
Did the
legs.
Greater Well create them? Are they themselves an aspect of the Greater Well? Or do they exist
This one,
entirely
it's
separately from
the
Greater
jar
Well?
innards from
What
the
will follow will,
Shadow
of
of the
course,
Erd
be
Tree
my
DLC.
own speculation, but let us start with a very basic fact about the Outer Gods, that they are very, very old. Firstly,
Then
the
for the
Outer God of Rot
rook,
is
we
referred
have
to
the
as
furnace
ancient
golems.
in the Blue Dancer chart,
I really like these
as it
things.
reads as follows: a cloth doll depicting a dancer garbed in blue, an ancient heirloom of some sort. The dancer in blue represents a fairy.
And yes,
whom
yes,
legend bestowed a
John, that
flame
is
sword
a
upon
grave
the blind
site.
swordsman.
That is a
Blade in
graveyard
hand,
down
the
there.
swordsman sealed away an ancient god, a god that was wrought itself.
And then for the
In
knight,
addition,
you
we know
have
the outer god of the
War
Death
Commander
Birds and
Gaius.
their death rites has
Hate
also
this
existed
boss
for a
so
very
much.
long time, given they have existed
They
in the
do have
time
lots of
before the
details,
Erd
but
Tree,
it was really
and
hard
this
to
is
get
told
like
to
the
us
super
directly by the
detailed stuff
exclusive Ghost Flame item description,
without
which reads as
breaking
follows.
up my printer.
In the
You
time
can get
when
much
there
better
was no
detail with
Erd
the
Tree,
resin.
death was burned in Ghost Flame. Death birds were the keepers of that flame. So you get the picture.
And then,
So if
oh
these
my god,
beings
I have
are
to
so
paint two of
old,
these. I have to
then
paint
it's
two of these
possible
next
that the
ones.
outer gods are individual
The
concepts
most.
that fractured into the existence when the One Great
What do you
itself
mean,
was
what
fractured
view?
and life began to spread. This is an idea presented by the Reddit user Lapses55 in a comment where they liken the outer gods as
What view? This
representations
one?
of certain fundamental laws in the world, like death and disease.
What?
There are those that take this idea further, that the Greater Will created these concepts, created these outer gods, or that they are beings that were also birthed
Okay.
from the fracturing of the One Great, i.e. they too are products of its hands. I don't believe that the Greater Will created the outer gods.
To
And personally,
win.
my
What
favorite
view?
theory is that the outer
This-
gods are cosmic
These two
beings
characters
that
have
are
completely
external
different
to the world of Elden
color
Ring.
schemes.
Going back to those linguistic translations.
This is going to be
by
the most
great
expensive
cosmic
piece,
axiom
and
last
but
protagonist,
actually,
that they are not
thank
creations
God,
of this world,
I already
nor do they
have
belong to it.
most of the
They
colors
are
for these.
simply cosmic beings from the great
Dark
void of
bronze
space, who have
and
essentially been
bright red
attracted to this world.
and
That's
white,
at least my understanding,
and then
emphasis
silver,
on these gods
like
being
royal
external
sterling
to this
silver.
world. And again, we can
and
find
royal blue.
allegories for these beings in Tolkien's Legendarium.
Oh yeah, then dark
There are
gray down here
cosmic
for the
beings that
stone.
also exist
Two
outside
conflicting
the
color
creations
schemes.
of Iluvatar and are unknowable and not
Oh,
even
I already tried
understood by
painting
the
it,
gods
but
themselves. For example, there's Ungoliant,
this
the
was
great
like
spider who corrupted
maybe
the
a
two
month,
trees while allied
a
with
year,
Melkor.
roughly a year and 1
In
month
Chapter
ago.
8 of the Silmarillion,
when I
Ungoliant
printed
is
this.
described as having unknown origins, even
But
to the Eldar.
it gets even more
And is
detailed
believed to have
because
crawled from
she's
the
holding
abyss
two swords,
surrounding
one's on
Arda,
fire and one
i.e.
has
the
magic
void
on
of
it.
space, and chose to remain there.
And then his arm,
Ungoliant,
his hand
therefore,
broke
is an
off, but
external being
he has a
outside
spear.
of the creation of Arda, who has simply come here. And at this point, I'd just like to
And then
interject that
the
if you are interested in Tolkien lore like
king.
I am,
Oh my god, the
I would
king.
recommend the channel The Red Book. This is a tremendous channel that I've been
Or well,
enjoying
it
immensely recently,
hasn't.
who
It
goes
didn't
into
take
lot
a
of
year
depth
for
and
that.
detail about specific topics
It's been a
in
year
Tolkien
since I printed it.
Legendarium, and I will link that channel below if you are interested.
But this is the king,
Like Ungoliant,
obviously an
I
upscaled
speculate that
model.
The outer gods are cosmic beings, unknowable
It's
and
the,
incomprehensible to us, separate from the creation of this world, that come from
it's
a
kindly
realm beyond
Mikola.
ours, and are drawn to this
He's-
mortal plane like moths to a flame.
I don't know whether
I
to
have
call him
nothing solid to
awesome
back this up,
or
of course,
a manipulator.
beside the linguistic evidence that we've already looked at, and the usual
But
tropes
he has
of
the
great
most,
cosmic
he has the
beings.
simplest color scheme.
With these ideas
Like,
of the
there,
cosmic
it's,
and
I'd
external
say
gods
maybe
in mind, let us take a moment to analyze each of the confirmed outer gods to assess what their
9
abilities and
paints
limits actually are.
in total.
The first of the confirmed outer
Yes,
gods
the hair.
is
I love the hair. I would
Formless
kill
Mother,
for hair like
or
this.
Mother of Truth, which mows communion with it,
And then
results in him
his
becoming the Lord of Blood. There is then
His
the outer god of Rot,
gay
one of the most
brother
direct
that he's
references
married
of
to.
their kind, and this is the god sealed underneath the lake of
Promise
Rot,
consort
and
Radagon.
responsible for the
I
spread
love
of
this
the
piece.
Scarlet Rot
He's the.
and its
This is the
incubation
queen.
within millennia.
Strongest piece in chess.
Then we have
Obviously,
the
it's got to be
outer
the
god of
strongest
the dead
character in the
birds,
game.
that being which acts through its envoy, the twin bird, and her children, the death
I
birds,
cannot
who
wait
spread
to
the
paint
death
these.
rates.
It's gonna be
Finally, the
so
only
much fun to
other
paint these ones.
definitive outer
I
god
personally
is
like
confirmed
the
by
shadow side
application that we spoke about earlier,
over the
and this is the outer god of the frenzied flame, which
this
spreads its influence
the white
through
side.
frenzy.
the lands between side.
There are other potential candidates, such as
But
the forces
I
behind
am
the various
going
winds,
to take a nap.
the god of the
I'm
crystalline,
tired.
or the fell god. But quite
But
frankly,
I will
we
be
just can't know
streaming
for
around
certain,
roughly
'cause they're not
5 to
referred
6
directly as outer gods.
tomorrow.
And no, I do not believe there is a
So,
outer
thank you
god
for
of
joining the stream.
dragons,
I
and
will see
cover
all of
this
you
in my Greater
tomorrow.
Will section shortly.
Bye.
But let us review the outer gods and attempt to